really is a special day to be at church. I love what Hope said. She said the best church in town, and you should always feel like your church is. I mean, we love every church and pray for every church that lifts up the name of Jesus, but I love this house, and I'm so glad that he called me here. I'm glad he called you here, and I'm so thankful for the season we're in as a church. I was thinking just over the last few years how it has been amazing that God has not just sustained this church, but you see the church all over the world growing and expanding. You just can't stop the church. It's like it was God's plan, and that he meant for it to be and to just lead us into not just personal victory, but to be a part of this great kingdom victory. He really believes he is seeking to save all that are lost and broken. And I was just thinking about my own life. You know, Amy and I have been sharing through this series that one of the best decisions we ever made, well, let's just say one of the best decisions she ever made was to choose me. And then no, but it was that is to choose. We chose each other, but to be planted in the local church, to be placed in the local church, to find a place where you can belong and grow. And so we've been over the last few weeks have been talking about our different core values, and we have them hanging. They're like keychains. They're hanging in the foyer there. And today I want to take a few minutes before our offering time to talk about just a heart for generosity and gratefulness. It's a value. It's a core part of who we are as a church. And then today at the end, we'll have a time of worship again with music, and then there'll be time for you to come and participate in giving. And I also want to tell, if you are checking out LifeGate today, there is no pressure to give and participate in the offering. We want to encourage you to celebrate and be thankful and give thanksgiving, but there's never any pressure on that but if you're a part of this house, this is a special day for you, for us to come and over and above our tithes and offerings, bring an offering to the Lord. And in the Bible, it's called extravagant giving. There was these times of corporate offering where they would gather together and they would practice gratefulness. They would practice generosity. And I want to read a story from Psalm 139. I began earlier with it, but I want to read some of the details and the heart that these people gave. Their heart was in the house. And I think is what's powerful about it. I want you to look and see how closely connected gratefulness and generosity are. How they go together. That when you're grateful, you can't help but be generous. And when you're generous, it's an overflow of a grateful heart. The opposite is true too, right? When you're not grateful, or maybe you take it for granted, what begins to seep in? Criticism. Or almost negativity, or we call it, well, I'm just speaking the truth. But sometimes that's not truth. It just needs to be spoken. It's done in a slanted way. But the positive of that is this thing that just bursts in our hearts. And you watch this. I don't want to give the too much of it. I want us to read through it and see it. But man, it's just a heart of generosity and a heart of gratefulness. Check this out. This is Psalm 139. This is a little over 1,000 years ago, and this was a heart for the house offering. This is what they were doing. They gathered all the people. They really gathered the whole nation. And in today's money, they gave over $4 billion. We're believing for just a little bit below that today, $4 billion. But check this out. 1 Chronicles 29, 6 through 18, it says, "Then the family leaders, the leaders of the tribes of Israel, the generals, the captains of the army, the king's administrators, officers, all gave willingly for the construction of the temple of God." Look, there is no better place to be generous with your resources than the kingdom of God. There's no better place to be generous with your resources. I believe you need to be generous everywhere you go. I believe it's a part of who we are. I think it's part of, I think Jesus is generous everywhere he went, not just in the church. He was a generous person. So we are generous people and grateful people, but there's no place like being generous in the house. There's no place like being generous in the house, because he takes that, connects it to his kingdom agenda. And so that's what they're doing. For the construction of the temple of God, they gave about 188 tons of gold. Just about 188 tons of gold. 10,000 golden coins, 375 tons of silver. Silver was more valuable in that day than gold. 675 tons of bronze, 3,750 tons of iron. They also contributed numerous precious stones, which were deposited in the treasury of the house of the Lord under the care of Jehiel, a descendant of Gershon. The people rejoiced over the offering, for they had given freely and wholeheartedly to the Lord. King David was filled with joy. Then David praised the Lord in the presence of the whole assembly. O Lord, the God of our ancestors Israel, may you be praised forever and ever. Yours, O Lord, is the greatness, the power, the glory, the victory, and the majesty. Everything in the heavens and the earth is yours, O Lord, and this is your kingdom. We adore you as one who is over all things. Wealth and honor came from you alone, for you rule over everything. Power and might are in your hand, and at your discretion people are made great and given strength. O Lord our God, we thank you and praise your glorious name. But who am I and who are my people that we would give anything to you? Everything we have has come from you, and we give you only what you gave us first. So how did they model generosity? How did they model gratefulness? And then what can we learn from this ancient Heart for the House offering in the way that we give and participate today, but also how do we walk out here today? How does this value look in our lives? You know, we talked about you don't walk into LifeGate and you put the value on. You learn the value at LifeGate and we walk out and we carry it everywhere we go. And so this is not just something that is, we don't just put it on when you walk in or something that we act like when we're in the room. But it's something that we carry everywhere we go. And so how do we live a life of gratefulness and generosity? And I think there's a few things we can learn from it. And the first one is, man, they love to give. That you and I, that we learn to love to give. There are people who love to give and people who like to give and people who don't like it at all. But learning to love to give, to experience the joy in giving. It says the people rejoiced over the offering. You know what that meant? It meant that they loved what they got to do. There was joy in their giving, for they had given freely. So that was not under pressure, not under obligation, but they gave freely and wholeheartedly. Man, think about that word, wholeheartedly. They didn't just give half-heartedly. They didn't just give reluctantly. Man, they gave with their whole entire hearts. They weren't double-minded in their thinking. They weren't give it and then, well, I wish I hadn't done that. But man, they gave, and it was wholeheartedly, and they saw it as an investment of their heart. We have this built today. Don't you love these churches? I kept calling them houses, little houses, but they're really churches and houses. But today, as we come and give, we thought this was just symbolic that you're actually taking the resources that you wouldn't have had God not given them to you anyway. But you get to take that, and you're not just being a bucket plunker. You ever heard that? Grew up in the Baptist church. I was taught, don't be a bucket plunker. You're getting to invest, and there is no better place to invest your resources, time, talent, or treasure than when you place it within the local church. And that's what they were doing. They loved, they were excited, they were anticipating this, they were all in. And the amount of the treasure isn't what made it special. It was the amount of their heart. It was the Bible, Jesus actually taught this. He says, your treasure is where your heart is. And so he was saying, hey, your resources are connected to your heart. And so, come on, this was hard-earned money. This was hard-earned resources. And when you take that and decide to invest it, to give it willingly and to give it wholeheartedly, man, it's this beautiful thing that God does. 2 Corinthians 9:7, it says, let the giving flow from your heart, not from a sense of religious duty. Let it spring up freely from the joy of giving, all because God loves hilarious generosity. And he loves a joyful giver. And these people modeled loving to give. Do you love to give? Do you love to be generous? Number two, they got to give. You get to give. This isn't a got to, this is a get to. And you see that they were getting the opportunity to give. And it says, this is your kingdom. We adore you as the one who is over all things. This isn't something we got to do. This is something we get to do out of an overflow of gratefulness. That word adoring, it means this. It means to worship with a profound reverence. Wow. When you give to God, guess what happens? It's not just a natural thing, it's a supernatural thing. Because I just stepped over into place when I give to God my time, talent, and resources, all of a sudden God turns that into something supernatural for his kingdom, for his purpose. And it's this beautiful, it's almost like this heavenly transaction that when I do it out of a heart of adoration, out of worship to him, it's not just a natural transaction or a physical transaction. All of a sudden something spiritual is happening, not spooky, spiritual, where God is able to take what we release from our hands and he's able to use it to extend his kingdom. We say this around here a lot, but he's the only one that can turn $1 into a soul. He's the only one that can take our time. I mean, I think about our dream team and how generous people are with their time around here. And I think about, man, as you give your time, he turns that into not just filling a hole or making sure some service is done to no account. No, this is about the kingdom. This is about the difference that's making. Lives aren't changed just by us just sitting around and hoping they're changed. It requires intentionality and investment, and it's out of a heart that adores, a heart that gets to, not has to. And he says that they came and they adored. It was this act of worship. Aren't you grateful for the opportunity? Aren't you grateful for the opportunity to give up any of our resources, our time, our talent, and our treasure? And then David says, this is one of my favorite lines that I think that in any time of the Bible, I know I say that about every verse, every time I have the opportunity to speak. This is my favorite verse out of all of them. But this is a really special one. He says, but who am I and who are your people that we could give anything to you? Everything we have has come from you, and we give you only what you gave us first. And I believe more than just this moment or this offering, this is an attitude that you live to give. This is, man, I love to give, I get to give, but it's an attitude and a heart of gratefulness and humility. Not that we're so special that God should just be honored that we would give anything to him. I feel bad even saying that like that. But that almost like you realize God doesn't need your time, your talent, or your resources. It's a gift to us. Giving is the gift that he's given us to bring to him, to bring on, and we wouldn't even have it if it weren't. The very breath that we breathe was a gift that he breathed into our lungs. I mean, think about that. All over the world, 7.5 billion people. Many of them don't realize who created them and who their father is, but they're breathing the very breath that he gave them. And then to give that back to him, to give that breath back to him in my time and my talent and in my resources. It says they gave with a humble heart. They weren't doing God a favor. They were honored and humbled to have the opportunity to bring something to God. And listen, we think about, sometimes we get so much, we take on so much pressure about amount of time, amount of money, amount of resources. And the other side of this is again, it's about our heart, not about the amount. But David also said something very powerful. He said, I'm not going to bring you something that hasn't cost me something. And that speaks more about not the weight as much about the weight of what we bring to God, because God doesn't need what we bring him. He's not on an ego trip. But it speaks of the weight of our God. Is what I bring the Lord in my life, what I bring the Lord in my resources, what I bring the Lord in a gift, does it reflect his generosity towards me? Because I'm only bringing what he's already given me, but is it a reflection? Is my life a reflection of, am I all in or am I holding back? And I love this heart of David. It says, man, how could I bring, and he led a whole nation into this. He wasn't willing to ask him to do something that he wasn't willing. Pastor Tony, I don't remember how much of that was David's. Do you remember? Of the 4 billion, it was a lot. Yeah, that's right. Over and above what all the people brought, David says, I'll bring even more. Over and above. And then I want you to see something really special that this happened. This wasn't just about a day. This was about what was to come. And the reason we want to live to give and position our lives in order to extend the kingdom, and this is what that means, all the way down to how we budget and how we organize our lives. There's a great principle that comes from, I think his name is Alcorn, is the name of the book, but one of the treasure principles that says that God doesn't increase my resources so that I can increase my level of living, but he increases my resources so that I can increase my level of giving. That at the end of my life, you can't take it with you, but you can send it on ahead. And that's the heart of living to give. It's positioning myself so that when God says give, I can say yes. And can I just tell you, I haven't always been there. We've always had enough. There are times that we had, my dad said, he taught me growing up, he said, listen, buddy, sometimes you're gonna have more than enough, sometimes you're gonna have less than enough. But you need to make sure, and he was trying to teach me stewardship, and I've kind of learned stewardship the hard way. Anybody else, you've learned it, the like on the backside of it, you're like, I wish I would have. But now, I'm in this place in my life where I'm looking and saying, man, how can we not just look and say, worried about status and what the world measures as success. Man, how does the kingdom look different when I'm done sucking wind than when I got here? And that means saying to our God, thank you for the opportunity. Not you should have given me more. Or you should have this, or I should have that. Man, you can spend your whole life saying, I wish I had this, or I should have had this. Or you can stand right where you are and say, thank you for the opportunity. I have a heart of gratefulness, God. All that I have has come from you. How could I not bring you the best of what I have? And then I don't just say it, but I live it in the way that I live. And I look and I say, how can we organize our lives? How can we organize our budget? How can we prioritize our time so that the kingdom comes first and it is extended? And I love this. If you'll take care of his house, he'll take care of your house. I've learned this. You don't have to worry about your stuff. You put his stuff first. Seek first his kingdom. And he says, all that other stuff, it'll be given to you. You'll have what you need. Why? Because he can trust you with the resources. He can trust you with the gifts. If you don't use them for you and use them for your success and use them for your status, if you'll use them for his status, we're here to make Jesus famous in our homes, our community, and the world. There's one name that is above all other names. And I want a life and a legacy. I want to leave a difference. I want to leave an impact. How about you? And what they did in this single offering, I know it was a family offering day where all of them came. I love it says the households came and they brought their gifts to the Lord. But this built a temple, but it's more than that. It made a place for the presence of God to reign in that region. And then even beyond that, after all these people were in the grave, even beyond that, we know Solomon came after David. And then we know that, did you realize if you fast forward a few hundred years, all these different things, these pieces came together. And there was a man that came and his name was Jesus, and he was born through this line. And you say he was born because of that offering. It wasn't just because of that offering. He was born because God chose to join with men and women's hearts to make a place for the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords to be born into the earth and to reconcile humanity to himself. God does big things when we decide to engage with him and make space for him to do something special. Sometimes when we give our time, we go, oh, it's gone, but not in heaven's language. Well, when I give this resource, when I give money or I give something that was precious to us, it's not wasted, it's not gone. It's something that paves the way for eternal impact. My giving creates ripples on earth and eternal impact in heaven. Every time we give, the kingdom is extended. Every time we give, the kingdom is extended. And so my prayer today isn't that it's just a celebration, because we're celebrating the goodness of God, the faithfulness of God. We've been hearing stories all month long. You've heard some of them on the screen, but there's been others that have shared. Man, there are families that have seen the power of addiction broken over their families. There were people believing for, There's been people that were praying for that weren't able to have kids and just said, hey, we're going to put God first. We're going to bring God something, and then they see God open up. There's been promotions. There's been some of you who are praying for a wife, and you got a wife now. But I mean, God, yeah, he can do the miraculous. I mean, there's some of you that I was just thinking about the things that we've believed for as a church, and our founding pastors are here to celebrate with us today, and the things that they were believing for, that they believed for today, that we would be here today, 18 years later, giving in another Heart for the House offering. And I love this because we can get so focused on what we want God to do that that's awesome that we want to focus that, we want to believe for that, but we also want to look and say, God, thank you. Thank you. You don't have to do this, but you choose to. There's a beautiful song that I love. It says, God, you don't have to, but you choose to. Wow. And that he picked us and put us here in Villa Rica, west side of Atlanta. Some of you are like, you didn't even know where Villa Rica was 3 years ago. But God brought you here and positioned you here, and he placed you here and planted you here, and then we get to be a part of build your church, build your church. Man. And he picked us for such a time as this. And then look at what God has done, but also today as we give and as we worship. Man, let's be more excited about the kingdom than we ever have before. Maybe you have felt a little reluctant in your generosity. Just look at the goodness of God. You can't help but be generous. Reflect on who he is. And look at what God can do. What he does through our generosity is generational. And you see the ripple effect on earth. We've been testifying of some of that we've seen. But you also see something that way outlives you. And it goes beyond what is just something we place in the offering. Why? Because it's our hearts. We're investing our hearts in the house. Will you bow your heads and close your eyes? And our greatest example of generosity is Jesus. He gave it all. God sent Jesus, and it says in John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave. He was so generous in his giving that where we couldn't find a way out, he made a way where there was no way. And maybe today you may be a part of a church, or maybe today is the first time that you've been in a while, but you would just say, hey, in my heart, I feel away from God. I don't have a personal relationship with him, and I'd like to begin that today. I'd like to put my trust and my faith in him. If you were to breathe your last breath today, if you don't know that you would go to heaven, and I want you to be sure of that today. He wants you to be sure of that today. Would you accept his free gift of salvation, his generosity that he has poured out before you? Maybe you've prayed that prayer before, but I also want to ask you, maybe today you need to recommit your life to him and you need a fresh start. If you would just say, hey, he hasn't been number one. It's kind of a part of my life, but I feel like I'm away from God, and today I need to come back home. Either one of those two decisions are the most important decisions you'll ever make. He loves you so much. And in this moment, we're not going to embarrass you or call you out. I'm not going to make you come up or say anything or anything like that. I'm just going to simply ask you, would you just raise your hand and say, yes, that's me. Pastor, will you pray for me? I need to begin a relationship with Jesus today. If that's you, would you just slip your hand up and put it right back down? Ready to say yes to Jesus, ready to recommit your life to him. Maybe you're watching online today and that's you, and right there where you're at, you can pray this prayer. You can make this decision right there in your heart. You might want to just put in the comment bar, hey, that's me. Put a hand up. Yes, pray with me today. I need to make Jesus the Lord of my life. In this moment, I'm just going to give you some words to pray. You can pray your own prayer or these words. Just pray it from your heart. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for sending Jesus. Jesus, I believe you're real. I believe you really did come and you died on the cross. And you paid for my sin and shame and darkness. You beat death. On the third day, you rose again. And you are alive and well in a real place called heaven. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for this free gift of salvation. I receive it with all of my heart. Today, I put my trust in you. I thank you that when I breathe my last breath here, that I'll see you face to face in a place called heaven. And I thank you that a relationship with you begins right now. Thank you that you have a purpose and a plan for my life. Thank you for your generosity. Today, I just come with a grateful heart. Where would I be had you not found me? You're my way, my truth, and my life. Here I am, serve you for the rest of my days. In your name I pray, amen.